Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Alex, I'm a Google developer expert for Firebase and I'm gonna show you in this video how to authenticate to Firebase using Google Identity one tap in Jetpack Compose. This is a video for an article that I wrote, link is in the description below, which was recently published on the Firebase official publication on Medium. So let's begin. As you probably already may know, I have written a few months ago an article regarding how to anonymously authenticate users with Firebase. But that's a solution that you should take into consideration only when you want to provide your users the capability to try your app. It's a pretty simple solution to implement and requires no personal data. But how about adding a real identity? Firebase provides many types of authentication like email and password, phone numbers, or even popular providers like Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and many more. So how to let our user authenticate with Firebase using their Google accounts? So I'll try to explain in this video a complete guide on how to implement an authentication mechanism with one of the most important providers such as Google with a full code example. So this is how our application looks like. We can press this button where it said sign in with Google. We can now choose our account. I have only one added on my device. So let's continue with Alex. And now we are already authenticated. On the profile screen, we only have a profile picture and a name. If we don't want to use the application anymore, we can simply sign out. And if we want to sign in again, we can simply click again on the button and continue with Alex as well. For example, if we don't want to use this application anymore, we can revoke the access. This means that everything that exists on the device will be wiped out. For many years now, we could integrate Google Sign In into our Android application using the documentation that exists at the following link. However, there is a new way of implementing almost the same mechanism, which is using the new Google Sign-in API. Google Identity Service (GIS) is a new set of APIs that provides users with easy and secure sign-in and sign-up in an easy-to-implement package for developers. So what does it basically mean? This new Google Sign-in API, which is part of GIS Google Identity Service, can be used to start the sign-in or sign-up flow when a user taps on a sign-in with Google button. This API can be used instead of the existing Google Sign-in API for sign-in flows. But there is an important announcement mentioned here. Google Identity Services will eventually replace the existing Google Sign-in API. For new apps, we recommend using Google Identity Service instead of the Google Sign-in API for sign-in and sign-up unless you need authorization server-side access or custom auth scopes. These features are coming in the future versions of Google Identity Service. Since Firebase also recommends integrating Google Identity Service in their official documentation regarding implementing Firebase sign-in with Google, then let's try together this new approach by implementing this in our Android application. Before starting, please make sure you have added Firebase to your project and use the following dependencies in your build Gradle files. This is the build Gradle module file, and this is the other one where we have added the corresponding dependencies. And as you probably see, we'll use Hilt for Android for dependency injection, Jetpack Compose, Live Data, and View Molder for having a clean architecture application where the asynchronous call to Firebase will be performed using Kotlin coroutine and asynchronous flow. First of all, let's understand the authentication flow. Since we are creating a very simple app, we'll only use two screens, the authentication screen and the profile screen. That being said, we'll redirect the user to the corresponding screen according to the authentication state. If the user is not authenticated, we'll redirect it to the auth screen. Otherwise, we redirect it to the profile screen. After we finish the creation of the app, when we launch it for the first time, we are asked to sign in. If we did this operation for the first time, then we have to sign up first. This means that each time we'll open the app in the future, we'll only need to use a single tap and we'll be automatically signed in. Once we get the credential of the Google account, we can further proceed and initiate the Firebase authentication process. If the user is new, meaning it signs in for the first time, then we'll also save some user details directly in Firestore for later use. Right after the authentication process succeeds, we have to attach a listener so we can always track the auth state of the user. Why? Because the user might sign out or even revoke the access at any given time. And if it does, we need to redirect it back to the auth screen. The new API provides a sign-in mechanism as well as sign-up mechanism. So in order to start up signing in, we need to create two objects, a sign-in client object and a begin sign-in request. We have added both object declaration inside our app module file, so we can inject them later in our application code. There are three things that we need to mention here. First, when we call set server client ID, we need to pass our server's client ID and not the Android client ID. We can simply get it right from the Firebase console. This is what I am talking about. The second one would be when calling set filter by authorized accounts to pass through as an argument, so it can show us only the accounts previously used to sign in. And the last one, when calling set auth select enabled, we also need to pass through so it can automatically sign in when exactly one credential is retrieved. On the other hand, when we sign up, the begin sign in request should be defined like this. Here we have only one thing to mention. When calling set filter by authorized accounts, we have to pass false as an argument instead of true, so it can show us only available accounts that exist on the device. In this way, we can choose which account should be used for authentication in this application. This is mandatory to be implemented because we need to cover the cases when the user doesn't have a previously authorized account. Once we have all these objects in place, we can begin the sign-in operation by start displaying the one-tap sign-in UI. To do that, the following code in our repository class is required. Now, when the operation is successful, we can emit the value of the begin sign-in result object so it can be used in the auth screen. So how to handle the response? Since we now have the desired object, we can go further and get the pending intent object and the intent sender object using chain method calls. As the doc states, the last object can be passed to the start intent sender for results method, so we can later get the result inside onActivity result. Unfortunately, nowadays the onActivity result method is deprecated in favor of the register for activity result method. But this approach can only work inside an activity, and since we are using Jetpack Compose, we have to use another method called remember launcher for activity result. There is one more thing that we need to mention here. If there are no saved credentials found, then we get an exception with a message that sounds like this: cannot find matching credential. This means that we need to go further and launch the one-tap sign-up flow. So we have to call the one-tap sign-up method right from within the failure case. However, if we found the credential, then we have nothing to do but to continue presenting the sign-out UI experience. If everything goes as expected, then we can go ahead and perform the Firebase authentication with Google credential right inside the launcher callback. If the user signs in for the first time, then we'll be able to write user data into Firestore. So inside our repository class, the following two methods are required. And inside our auth screen, we track the result for each operation. As soon as the user is authenticated, we attach the authentication listener to always know the auth state of the user along with the options to sign out and revoke the access. All these methods are also present in the repository class. The signout operation is quite simple. We only need to call the signout method on the Firebase auth object and the signout method on the sign-in client object. So we force sign out from Firebase and then from Google. Both operations are performed on the client. On the other hand, revoking a user access requires 4 operations. The first operation that we have to do will be to delete the user data, obviously if it exists in Firestore. So, if for example we have stored user data under root users UID, then we have to perform a delete operation exactly on this document reference. Since we have used in our project the authentication, this operation should always be performed before deleting the Firebase user object. Why? Simply because we have set the security rules to allow a delete operation in Firestore only if the user is authenticated. Then this operation should be added right before deleting the current user from Firebase. So the user needs to be authenticated before performing a delete operation. Moreover, if we perform the delete operation of the user from Firebase Authentication, the documentation says deletes the user record from your Firebase project database. If the operation is successful, the user will be signed out. So there is no need to sign out the user explicitly in this case. It's done automatically when the user is deleted. The third operation that we have to do is to revoke the Google access using Google sign-in client object. And the last operation that we have to do is to sign out the user from Google. The operation of tracking the auth state of the user is done right inside the main activity. So the auth state is a global operation, while the sign out and the revoke access states are added right inside the profile screen. There is something very important that needs to be mentioned. If we try to delete the Firebase user object after 5 minutes while signed in, please note that this operation is not possible as it's considered sensitive. So if you try to do that, you'll get an error message that sounds like this. This operation is sensitive and requires recent authentication. Log in again before retrying this request. To overcome this situation, we can simply re-authenticate the user with credentials using Firebase user re-authenticate method. In our app, we only display a snack bar with a similar message and the possibility to sign out. So as long as we try to delete the Firebase user object within the 5 minutes limit, everything will work perfectly fine. We are almost at the end. There is one more thing that should we discuss, which is the number of times you can decline the sign-in. When this happens, the call to the get sign-in credential from intent method will throw an exception containing a common status code cancelled. In such cases, we should temporarily disable the one-tap sign-in UI. How can we do that? We can use a property to determine whether to offer the user one-tap sign-in or not. It's really important to implement our own rate limiting for one-tap sign-in prompts, because if we don't, and if a user cancels several times in a row, the one-tap client will not prompt the user for the next 24 hours. In the end, I should also tell you that if you read some of my latest articles, you have probably already seen the fact that I'm using the MVVM architecture pattern. That being said, all the code in the project is divided in 3 separate layers: the data layer, the domain layer, and the presentation layer. Unfortunately for such a project, I didn't use use cases anymore, as they add more unnecessary complexity to our app. So adding classes with a single method in this case doesn't make any sense, so I consider that it's only a boilerplate code. As nice as it looks, there is also a downside. If the user is not logged in to any Google account on the Android device and wants to sign in or sign up, the authentication will fail. The error message sounds like this: missing feature, name auth API credential being signed in version equals 6. To solve this problem, you should implement the old way of signing in your user with Google. I have also written an article that you might find useful. As a conclusion, that's the simple solution for handling Firebase authentication with Google using a clean architecture with Jetpack Compose. I hope you find this video useful, and if you have any questions regarding this topic, feel free and leave a comment in the comment section below. So in the end, guys, you can check the entire article on Medium. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you think you learned something new, please subscribe to my channel, as you already know more videos are coming. Bye!